A little over 2 weeks ago, I passed 10,000 subscribers. That's insane to me, and I'm extremely grateful, but I also had zero idea what I would do if I ever hit 5 digits. And I realized I've been sitting on a small dragon's hoard of things I want to talk about that probably wouldn't fill an entire episode on their own. This episode also came out on June 5th, my 4th Bronyversary. So in honor of cool powers of 10, here's a chunky little sandwich of 10 horse things I've wanted to talk about for a while. Feel free to hop around, because for the next half hour, I'm going to be all over the place. This first one is a thinly veiled plea for you to come visit Whinny City PonyCon this weekend and Ponyville Ciderfest in November. They're a blast, and I'm actually on my first panel this weekend with a bunch of other creators. But to show you just how much passion goes into making these awesome events a reality, I want to talk about something really cool that happened at last year's Ciderfest, and a lot of it is thanks to this guy.
So my name is Vivid Syntax. I'm a fandom author. I love writing.
Whinny City and Ciderfest are both chaired by Charlie Worthley, a guy with a ton of passion for the fandom who is also a big fan of fun theming. And in 2022, he and Vivid started discussing how they could incorporate fan fiction into next year's theme for Ciderfest, and they drew inspiration from another of Charlie's passions.
One of the things that Charlie likes to do at Ciderfest, and I think this is really cool, is he likes to highlight different parts of the fandom, and often parts of the fandom that maybe don't get as much attention. Charlie had been interested in doing something like this for the writers, but he just had not had an idea of how to do it. And so we chatted in like May or March of 2022 about what this would look like. He had kind of pitched this idea of the now defunct Star Wars Galactic Cruiser experience, basically like a live action roleplay that where people who are attending can influence the story. It smacked to me a lot of like a choose your own adventure, but on like a massive scale.
The theme they landed on was an interactive storytelling adventure. Vivid Syntax was the head of the storytelling department. He and his team, including Nyronis, Sonic Suns, Steel the Warrior, Crackle's Cousin Cosplay, and Brandon White, put together this awesome overarching narrative ARG that began at opening ceremonies, with a story about the convention's mascot Fizzy Glitch accidentally scattering the pages of the Book of All Stories. Stories that could be accessed throughout the weekend by inputting hashtags hidden throughout the convention, which is where things get really interesting. Altogether, 50 writers wrote over 350 bite-sized stories, each of which could be entered by inputting a different hashtag into the convention's app. These hashtags were everywhere, given out by attending panelists, hidden on the booths of the vendor hall, even hidden in plain sight on the convention signage. A lot of them were given out by a troupe of over 30 cosplay actors whom you could give advice to about a dilemma, and they would reward you for your efforts with another code. It was a monumental effort, and one that Vivid says was made optional by design.
Like, we didn't want to force anybody to do anything they didn't want to, but we really wanted to leave the door open and make it as accessible as possible and give people the chance to be like, to stumble upon some cool things or to really find the way to interact with it in the way that best fit them.
Most of the stories ended with a choose-your-own-adventure style prompt about how you would solve the dilemma in the story, and your choices will be tallied by the convention app, which would award points to one of the 3 factions trying to obtain the pages for themselves. The heroes, led by Twilight Sparkle, Team Chaos, led by Discord, and the villains, led by Sombra, who was played by Vivid himself after he got roped into doing it during auditions.
During the audition process, when we were auditioning the actors for their different roles, one of the things that we would do is have them act as a character and, interact with one of us, either myself or Jenny, who would pretend to be one of the other characters, just to give them someone to kind of bounce off of. And while we were doing the auditions, I kept defaulting to Sombra just because I enjoy Sombra, I love him as a character, but I would just be there audition after audition being like, Twilight, what are you doing here? Do you really think you're going to collect the pages from me? And I did that enough times that Jenny eventually, between auditions, said, hey, Vivid, you're going to be playing Sombra, and I'm not going to take no for an answer, and I will build your cosplay myself if I have to.
It was a wild endeavor, and one that I wanted more people to know about because a lot of really passionate people came together to make that project a reality, and it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen at a convention, pony or otherwise. Let me get it out of the way quick. Gummy the Alligator is my favorite character in the franchise. He's got nothing going on, he doesn't impact the plot in any way, and he exists in a state of complete complacency at all times. He's my favorite member of a subset of characters I like to call the No Thoughts Head Empty Club. The characters in media that just seem content to be alive. I can ignore some of the license they took with him between the forked tongue and the pointed snout more closely linked to his saltier cousin the crocodile because he's just so damn cute, you guys. My parents wouldn't let me have a pet growing up, so I never knew what it was like to grow up with a little buddy. With most of the girls, production doled out character complementary, relatively low maintenance pets. A dog for the farm girl, a proper cat for Rarity, a quiet bunny for Shy. Twilight ignored the Hedwig warnings and got herself an owl to help her study, and he totally fits the whole Golden Oaks vibe she had going on. And I probably don't have to spell out that they gave Dash tanks so they could do a play on the tortoise and the mare, but my pet theory is that when the companions were being passed out, the powers that be got to Pinky and said, give her something wildly inappropriate. And so they gave her a baby alligator. But I had this dumb moment while rewatching Rainbow Rocks where they were doing a sleepover at Pinky's, and I thought, man, the rest of them all get their pets, but Pinky can't have a live baby alligator in her bedroom? Well, I guess that's fair. It's enough that the real version doesn't have teeth, so they can kind of circumvent that problem. I also like how a couple other characters got their own companion later in the series after the focus fell off the idea of everyone owning their own little dude. Celestia has Philomena, a badass phoenix that schlubs down to a Benny Hill gag every once in a while. Zecora has this cute little fire lizard buddy for one episode in season 9, though you don't see more than 15 seconds of him, and Starlight does a cute subversion where she sets up her office with a cute little potted plant philodendron she named Phyllis, a nice low-maintenance friend for a character who doesn't exactly shine in social situations. R.I.P. Phyllis. I think a lot about what I would get Shuffle as a pet, but I can't know what he wants because he doesn't know what he wants. A goat, a fish, a ferret,
A piece of toast!
a manta ray, his very own gummy, no, not the gummy from the show, but a completely legally distinct gummy that I made up, a baby garter snake, a screen-used Jumanji board from the 1995 adventure comedy film Jumanji, a shovel. This stupid idiot will pack bond with anything and keeps bringing home garbage. I love him so much. Do me a favor when this episode's done. Go pull up any episode of Friendship is Magic on any device you own, drop the playhead down anywhere they're not singing a song, and spend 30 seconds just listening to the background music. Here's an example.
Why, I wager if I switched them up, you wouldn't even know the difference.
Oh, don't be silly. Of course I would.
So which is the vintage one?
Mickey Mousing is the affectionate term given to the act of scoring a piece of media so the music matches or accentuates the action on screen. It was used a ton back in the days of silent cartoons, where the video and audio of a production had to be recorded separately and then played together in the theater. It gave the actions on screen a bit more oomph, and it's remained a popular scoring technique ever since. I most frequently noticed it watching old episodes of Tom and Jerry on Cartoon Network back in the day. But not all of the sounds in My Little Pony are made from scratch. One of the series' most famous Easter eggs is this sound effect. Or its highly similar elongated cousin. These have both been used what feels like dozens of times over the course of the series, like the fandom's very own Wilhelm scream. Both of these squeak sounds are filed away as animal toy noises in the General Series 6000 sound effects library, a library of over 7,000 professional sound effects released in 1992, which has seen extensive use in the US and Canada in the intervening 3 decades. The sound effects wiki has a list of many known uses of the two sounds broken down by film and TV show, so it could be fun to go find your other favorite TV show on that list and then go back and try to see if you can hear it used in there. I'm no stranger to reuse sound bites. Courage the Cowardly Dog was my favorite show as a kid, and they had zero shame in reusing sound clips in their episodes.
Watch.
But as a side complaint, it's really bizarre as a kid to hear 2 very different shows from your childhood use the same music library and have to be reminded while you're watching Yu-Gi-Oh! That, hey, that's the Fear Factor music.
We appear to be veering off course, sir.
Well, we better veer back on course before my brother finds out.
And I have to go through this all over again before that 50,000 seems tangible to me.
Any of my Dutch fans may also be in for a shock like I was after I noticed the previously on music from Wie is de Mol used in a certain other blockbuster that's about to turn 20 next month.
Welkom terug in Wie is de Mol.
Voor de tweede keer.
Time is scary. This next slot was going to be given to 2 different topics at one point, but I got halfway through writing both of them when I realized that I wanted each of them to be their own full episode, so instead I want to talk about a game nowhere near enough people are playing. Ponyguessr is a completely free browser-based game that presents you with a random frame of an episode of Friendship is Magic and asks you to name the episode it comes from. It was made by Steady Gaze, and an instance of open source code that plucks from My Little Pony, and I both love and hate the creator. Like GeoGuessr before it, players are stripped of any context and have to tell what the heck they're looking at based on smaller details you might not appreciate while watching the show. Things as simple as one-time characters or the presence of wings to more subtle details, like the trend of newer episodes to have more detailed hair, exaggerated expressions, and glimmer in general. The fun in this is that the frames really are randomized, which means you could be getting lucky, steamrolling along, and the randomizer will suddenly throw you a string of hoof picks, and Applejack, and dirt, And hoof pick. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Send it to forensics? On the other hand, some of these shots can get pretty crazy, either from catching a wild in-between or just remembering that the show is actually bananas sometimes. The interface is super user-friendly. If you're like me and can't remember the Daring Do episodes by name, you can type in keywords and options will pull up based on the episode synopsis to try to guess it for you. If you're up for some extra challenge, it also has audio mode, which is the same game but with 5, 10, or 15-second audio clips, but you can run into a wall there too. I challenge anyone watching to tell me what episode that is in the comments. I don't tell a lot of people this, but I have a weird bone to pick with quirky holidays. Maybe it's because I work a really boring desk job, because I've been pulled over at my cubicle more times than I can count so I can find out that today is National Sewing Machine Day. Like, what am I supposed to do with that information? I don't need International Talk Like a Pirate Day to embarrass myself. I do that for free on the daily. But I've softened a bit since it's mainly an excuse for especially bored office workers to talk about something on their shift. It's also a good way to naturalistically throw out an excuse for your horse show to do an entire episode around. Now, just up top, I know I'm probably missing some niche holidays from Gens 1 through 3. Yes, they're bananas, and yes, I plan on covering them eventually, but I only just finished the end of Flutter Valley, so please, no spoilers. It's really interesting to see what kinds of real-world holidays the franchise tries to tackle. One of my favorite horror anthologies, 2016's Holidays, is a series of shorts based on 8 well-known holidays, and half of the fun of it is trying to decide why they settled on the holidays they did. You want something with variety while still maintaining near universal appeal. Luckily, G4 arguably managed to hit 3 of the biggest holidays, at least in the Americas. Valentine's Day was renamed Hearts and Hooves Day, which is both cute and makes sense considering it would be weird for an equestrian holiday to be named after a murdered saint from a different universe. It's the basis for 2 amazing episodes in particular, the Love Potion from the episode with the holiday's namesake, and Secreted Mare, where Izzy takes up the reins as the patron saint of platonic love like she was working at the Cuddly Crab. Halloween gets a similar treatment as Nightmare Night, with a mythos refitted to play off kids' fears of Nightmare Moon, as well as the spooky but spotty Scaremaster, and in Make Your Mark for name-dropping a horror classic, and for Pipwitch in her absolutely immaculate eyeshadow. Then there's Christmas, renamed to Hearthwarming Eve in Gen 4, and renamed again to Winter Wish Day in G5, which I'm okay with since holidays have changed names before. I mean, it's not like I'm going to celebrate Saturnalia or Columbus Day anytime soon. The wild thing about Hearthwarming Eve is how the G4 team didn't just stop at a simple Christmas clone, but added a ton of adjacent pony-specific holidays. Hearthwarming Eve is canonically linked to a story in equestrian history of 3 ponykinds who agreed to not bicker in order to avoid freezing to death. Fun fact, this idea could loosely be based on the Christmas ceasefire of 1914, on which the 2005 film Joy Noel was based. Fantastic Christmas movie, highly recommend. On a more isolated level, Winter Wrap-Up Bops is a spring cleaning stand-in, while establishing itself as a believable part of the world's rules. They even get down to smaller, world-specific events like the Summer Sun Celebration or the Royal Swanifying Ceremony, both of which are great for quickly dropping your cast into a problem they have to solve. G5 expanded further on some additional holidays, like Mare's Day, a play on Mother's Day, Harvest and Hugs Day, which is just Thanksgiving with all the trappings of perfectionist family, and the Easter-adjacent Zephyr Heights Extravaganza. They sure do like doing Easter episodes. If Eggman Bunny had a nickel for every time he's been on my screen, he could afford a babysitter for his 1,000 kids. Speaking of Gen 5, there's a choice they made that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and I could never find a place to put it. Gen 5 ponies have Earth magic now, and I'm not sure how to feel about that. It's a decision introduced at the end of Make Your Mark Chapter 1, after the folks of Maritime Bay learned to cool it, and it later gets put to use with the addition of a community garden. The question I'd rather have answered is not why do Gen 5 Earth ponies have magic, and instead, why didn't Gen 4 Earth ponies have magic? Gen 4 and Gen 5 unicorns both have the ability to manipulate magic, while only Gen 5 Earth ponies have magic. Explaining Gen 4 Earth ponies reminds me a lot of that time I was in college, right at the peak of Gen 4 hype, and my friend Ashley was explaining to my wife the plot of this new movie Frozen that had just come out. Okay, so there's a kingdom, and the king has 2 daughters, and one of them has magic ice powers. Okay, what does the other one do? Well, the other one's just normal. What? Like, obviously no one who's seen Frozen would bat an eye, but you gotta understand how odd that sounds on paper. Unicorns can float stuff, Pegasi can fly, Earth ponies grow a mean potato garden. I got used to it pretty quick, since Season 2's Hearthwarming Eve made it clear just how trash the others are at growing basically anything. As far as Gen 5 EPs go, I'm fine with it. Quantum Epologist brought up an interesting criticism that the ability to make plants willy-nilly could be power scaled a bit better to keep them from manifesting Jumanji-level brush on a whim, but I'm optimistic they'll scale it back as the gen continues. The first time I noticed an animation error in Friendship is Magic, it was when Dash was looking for a new pet. In Act 2, she screeches to a halt in front of a line of hopefuls and somehow behind this one duck who was accidentally left on the wrong layer. Animation errors suck when they happen, as a viewer and especially as an animator watching your work back, but I'm not super interested in doing a full episode on them because there's not a lot you can do with that besides just list the ones you found. The ones I've noticed have luckily been mostly inconsequential to my enjoyment of the show, relegated to setting the wrong eye color, seeing background ponies randomly rendered as alicorns, and this blink and you'll miss it distortion of Dash's rig that's visible for a single frame before the cut to a new shot. The errors that really bother me are the microscopic mistakes, the ones that a normal viewer wouldn't even catch, the ones I only notice because I'm constantly combing through footage to get coverage from my videos. In this shot from the cart before the ponies, the wheel on this cart moves as a separate element, matching the speed of the carriage, except in the last few frames before the cut when the cart undergoes some significant wheel slide. Audio mistakes happen too, but I don't notice them nearly as often as visual tics. When the Crusaders say goodnight to Fluttershy in Season 1's Stairmaster, Applebloom's line gets cut off at the end by a literal split second.
Yes, Fluttershy. We promise, Fluttershy. Good night, Fluttershy.
An editor likely cut the line too close when arranging fine assembly and cut her line off at the toes. Again, this is a microscopic nitpick, not to be taken seriously. I just love editing and I stumble across things like this all the time. But if I'm going to be pointing out eye specs with these professional animators, the least I could do is take myself down a peg too. In doing these kinds of videos for 2 years, I've made my fair share of errors, both factual and poorly worded. I try my best to fact check these scripts before I shoot them, but more than a few errors have slipped through that I feel need to be corrected or at least acknowledged. Here's a quick rundown of some additional bullet points from my past videos. My greatest regret as a creator comes from a video from last year about fan theories. It was a really fun episode and I'm insanely proud of the first 90% of it, but then I went on a small tangent with regards to ships and I made the super poorly worded choice to suggest that the epilogue relationship between Pinkie Pie and Cheese Sandwich didn't pass my rigorous definition of the word canon. I'd like to formally disown that statement now if I could. It was beyond poorly worded and unbearably fun police of me to dive into weird tangential discussions about proof out of nowhere like that. As many comments, about 40% of them friendly, proceeded to point out, there are all kinds of in-show and out-of-show details that point to the legitimacy of the Ponk family. And for me to say, well, technically no one looked at the camera and said they were married, was a really dumb hill for me to die on in hindsight. The next big one that bothers me is a moment from an early video about early installment weirdness, when I stated that the show chose to use more vibrant colors after the first 2 seasons, when that's actually pretty far from the truth. They don't automatically tell you this when you join the fandom, so I'm trying to spread awareness, but in America, the iTunes version of the first 2 seasons had some sort of error related to the way they were encoded. I'm not sure about the specifics, but because of this error, there are a lot of reproduced rips floating around out there of the first 2 seasons of the show that have noticeably desaturated, washed out colors. When I joined the fandom, I didn't bat an eye and just assumed that they chose partway through to use more vibrant colors. But no, that's just a weird third-party error. The more you know, I guess. In the 2.5 hours it took me to rank every episode of Friendship is Magic, a good handful of small mistakes slipped through the cracks. One time I had a brain fart and called Smolder Ember, which is interesting to me and I want to know if this happens to anyone else. For certain pairs of characters, when I try to tell them apart by name, my brain does a small hiccup before making sure I have the right character. Brains are weird that way. I also mentioned that Flash Sentry is voiced by Andrew Francis when he's actually voiced by everyone's favorite Matsuda, Vincent Tong. I chalk this one up to an honest brain fart, but please tell me you at least understand how someone could make that mistake.
Look, I know you said no about going to the fall formal with me, but would you reconsider and at least have one dance?
I'm good. I was hoping my favorite aunt could watch me for a few hours.
Another commenter pointed out that I was using the term pilot wrong when referring to the first episode of Friendship is Magic. A pilot is not the same thing as the first episode of a show. A pilot is a standalone episode of a show that gets shopped around to networks looking to purchase a new property. Sometimes a pilot will be reincorporated into the show proper, but that's usually not the case. The Friendship is Magic would be the first episode of the show, but not necessarily the pilot. I also stated there were no kites in Starlight's room in the parent map, and I legitimately thought there weren't any, until a commenter well-versed in kites pointed out a couple that slipped right under my nose. I was also way too hard on that episode when I ranked it, so it probably goes up several notches if I did that ranking again. I knew I was gonna forget something when I tried to create a comprehensive list of every piece of pony media, and sure enough, I forgot a few fringe things, like Shy Pie's Happy Birthday song, and a few TV parodies, like that riff on the theme song from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. A lot of my videos feature a lot of really great work from some really great people, and I wanted to give them a shout out. I'll provide links in the description if you want to know more about them. A lot of the assets for my thumbnails were made by Beatlinked, a good friend of mine who does these amazing art style imitations of the 2017 movie. They're super talented and supportive, highly recommend. I met Eryn Erikard while getting art done for the Ponycast, and I've absorbed more about Transformers from her in the intervening 3 years than I ever thought possible. She's got a really fun sense of humor, and she's constantly doing fun little goof pieces I think more people should check out. Most recently, I met an artist named Featherbloom who did an absolutely stellar job knocking out near show quality renders of Pinky for last month's episode about alcoholism. It's seriously the best I've ever seen in that regard, and they need more love. In terms of music, a good majority of my background music comes from my buddy Canvas, a musician who just finished her BA in music production and specializes in electronic music. My main theme, that lo-fi cover of the Friendship is Magic theme that you're listening to right now, was done by Single Purpose, who really knocked it out of the park. And finally, Spin Scissor is a buddy of mine, but he's also quickly becoming one of my favorite fandom musicians. He's helped me out twice before, on Google Wrap Up and that now deleted Fluttershy parody. We've told him repeatedly that he's a dead ringer for Adam Young of Owl City fame, with really solid production skills all around. I'm always going to recommend his rarity ballad Marshmallow Girl, but he released an EP called Ego Machine a few months ago that I think you should definitely check out. But if you're new here and you want a personal recommendation, here are 5 of the videos I'm most proud of, either because I'm proud of how they turned out or how they affected people. Equestria's Next Top Motormouth takes a look at the most statistically talkative characters of all time, building off an enormous fan project and using actual data to come to a statistically rigorous top 20. I love this episode because I love crunching data, and getting to read about obscure other roles these VAs have had in the past was an absolute blast. And it gave me an excuse to watch Air Bud again, so there's that. The Cutie Count is my April Fool's Day parody of Dead Meat, probably my favorite YouTube channel. I got to tally up everything the Crusaders tried to earn their cutie marks while realizing just how hard it is to write in someone else's voice. It's full of little fun facts and Easter eggs about everything Crusader, and I love how it turned out. Ranking every episode is exactly what it says on the tin for 2.5 hours. It took 2.5 years to make, and I will never make anything that long ever again. It's got over a dozen artists and a handful of musicians, and for how big a pain in the butt it was at the end, I'm astounded it's actually cohesive. Back in 2022, I tried to make a comprehensive breakdown of all pony media, and I'm proud to say I got most of it. I didn't count any comics or books, and I forgot a couple of commercials here and there, but I liked having a mostly complete list to reference. And I got to introduce some weirder niche stuff to a general audience. Pony Parents is my favorite episode. It's not often I'm able to get really personal, but I got to talk about a fun topic, intersperse some personal stories, and most importantly, read dozens upon dozens of comments of people talking about their experiences with their parents, which was really very sweet. Thanks so much for watching. If you're thinking about coming to Whinny City this weekend, it's a total blast. I highly recommend it, and so does Vivid.
I mean, the conventions are amazing. If you get a chance to go there, it wouldn't have happened without the fantastic community that we have. I am so proud to be in the Brony fandom, and it fills my heart with joy to see all the amazing things that we can create together.
I'll be doing a panel on Friday at 6 with some other content creators about making things. I'm really super excited, and I'm probably on the train ride down when you're watching this. I really love making these, and I really enjoy the positive impact they seem to be having on people. Until next time, I'm some horse on the internet. Thanks for watching.